You... You did it, sir.
I did it? He did it. I did it.
He did it.
You did it, sir.
I did it.
He did it.
I did it. Atrocity is mine!
One of the running constants for me on this channel, despite all the opinion shifts that I'm susceptible to go through, is that I really don't like Zane on a fundamental level. Over the course of several years, I fell out of love hard with Zane's character, and over time he's gone from one of my favourite characters to what I thought was completely unsalvageable. Dragon's Rising Season 3 has what I believe to be Zane's worst outing to date, and every single issue that I had with his character felt dialed up to 10, and certain scenes that I don't dare name felt like they walked back on all of his meaningful development in the earlier seasons of this franchise. I'll be honest, I thought that was wraps for him. In the lead up to Season 4, I was absolutely dreading his return to this franchise because I just didn't see a world where his character was being done any sort of justice by the show, but to my surprise, they pulled off Zane's return with unexpected grace. So let's discuss whether Zane has actually been saved from the gutter he found himself in. I found that in the first half of Dragon's Rising Season 4, Zane is able to be smart, expressive, funny, and emotional, and it felt like he actually had a place within the story that the season wanted to tell, which is something I haven't been able to say for a really long time. His identity as a Ninjago is actually used to some great effect here, allowing for some really sweet moments between him and the rest of the cast. Granted, he doesn't have any sort of character arc here, as in any sort of character progression, but it's very similar to what Dragon's Rising Season 2 did with Kai, in the sense that he has some really neat little moments that build off of previous installments to deliver something unseen for the past few years with Zane. In my last video about Zane, I made 3 points on why I believed he was the worst ninja currently on the team, so I think it would be fitting to go through those points and see where they did and didn't improve. The first point I brought up is Zane's robotic nature had completely taken over his character, simply becoming the robot of the group. This problem with Zane is really interesting to discuss, because a point that I never really brought up in either of my original videos is that leaning into him being a robot isn't inherently something bad, on the condition that it's done with taste and tact, something the showrunners haven't been able to do since the earliest seasons of the show. As a response to the criticisms the writers presumably received from fans of the show, it feels like Zane's character has had a not so subtle shift from being different because he's a Ninjago to being different because of who he is as a person. Zane being a Ninjago is something that's brought up by the characters or Zane himself this season, but is always done with a purpose and meaning. One of my favourite moments is the Archdragon of Life's surprise when Zane goes to comfort them because of his quote artificial nature, only for Zane to remind them that his emotions are just as real as anyone else's. Some ancient life guardian, whatever the Archdragon was, who knows Zane is a Ninjago with an artificial soul, still acknowledging his humanity is a really wonderful little moment, and their final words to Zane being a wish to meet his soul in the next cycle is some really good stuff. Characters bring up his difference while still considering him as a living being just like everyone else, unlike other seasons where it felt like they just tried to push away that side of him, and ironically leaning way too far into it. I'm well aware of the fact that in the past, Zane's humanity being brought up by the characters hasn't actually done a lot to reaffirm it, but this time around Zane is just way more expressive and involved in the plot, which both do so much for him. Zane joking about saying words like janky and bummer, while jokes that are a little bit drawn out, do feel natural in the moment because that's a thing that normal people say, and Zane is famously a pretty normal person. They pulled off Zane using slang way better than the tournament when he was detecting cringe, or when he was saying he got buffed for swollenness or whatever the hell it was he said. Zane being a robot feels like it was addressed pretty well within the plot, while not boiling down every moment to him over-explaining something because he's a supercomputer. He just felt way more human, and so his titanium nature being brought up always felt pertinent to what was happening and who Zane is as a character. The second point I brought up in that video is not understanding what made him work in earlier seasons, and this issue seems to have been addressed for the most part. I never really went into this point much beyond talking about the very blatant messaging of his arc, but this season brings forth quite a few elements of his character that made him appealing early on, the first of which being his connection to himself and others. Despite Zane being different, he had a strong bond with his brothers and teacher, and in a season that focuses on connections like this one, it was a pretty perfect time to make that part of his character apparent again, since for a while now Zane's connections haven't really been explored in any sort of depth. In Dragon's Rising, he consistently gets put onto a subplot and split apart from the main team in some way, and while the entire team is split up this time around, he's put on what I'd consider at least to be the most important and engaging of the plotlines we're given. This part is the first time in Dragon's Rising that I feel like Zane has really been able to interact with the newbies, and while Lloyd is in the temple, he serves as a sort of leader to them, and the few interactions they have are really refreshing for him, especially after only being able to speak to Cole or Frohickey for the past couple of seasons now. He also has his aforementioned connection with the Life Dragon, so all in all he felt pretty connected and naturally inserted into the plot and the dynamics of the group. Zane's connection with himself is also explored for his newly introduced art hobby. I said this in my initial review of the season, but Zane being used on commentary for the importance of art and using it as a medium to express oneself and their own human nature is some great stuff for him, as it's something they could only really do with him, but it's great how Zane is able to use this as a way to connect with Lloyd. One of my biggest letdowns regarding Lloyd's visions in Dragon's Rising Seasons 2 and 3 is that he never really spoke to Zane about them, since visions that foretell the future to varying accuracy are something that Zane's also had to deal with at multiple points in his life, and it would have been great to see them connect on that front. While it isn't part of his Source Dragon Visions storyline, Zane being able to teach Lloyd about the methods of introspection and meditation through art is some really neat stuff, and highlights how in touch he is with himself and his comrades. The final point brought up in that initial video was that Zane's relationship with Pixel just wasn't very good and wasn't very well written by any means imaginable, and unfortunately for all the good this season has, this isn't really something I can speak on right now. They were only so generous as to give us one scene with them together, so there isn't a whole lot to really work with. They share a couple of cute enough scenes if you're a fan of them, but Pixel being a total non-character in the story is still a persisting issue, so hopefully with Zane being on the right track, they can start to put Pixel on this same path when she has a bigger role in the story, if ever. I'm somewhat let down by this because this was a really big issue I was hoping they'd fix at some point, and I don't get the impression that it's going to be fixed anytime soon. With all of my points addressed, it's time to answer the surely lingering question on your mind about whether they fixed Zane, and my current answer is unfortunately going to have to be no, they didn't, but I do think they are on the right path. Most of what he gets is good, I'm not here to deny that, and this isn't to discredit the massive shift the Ninjago team has put in to make him a better character, but there's still a lot of room for them to grow with his writing. While this stuff done with him is good, it would be a lot better if Zane doesn't literally turn to the camera and explain to the viewer how he's good now, because it makes it feel like they fixed him in a very performative way. With Kai, for example, I never really got the impression that he had to turn to the camera and exposit about how good his character is now. He was just written better and everyone could tell without it being directly said. Here it more so feels like the writers have heard the criticism dished out and have tried as hard as they can to tell us he's fixed, which leads to some really neat moments, sure, but it just isn't how I'd want Zane to be written for the foreseeable future. Moreover, I'd definitely like to see Zane get an actual character arc sometime soon. While he's well written enough and all that here, all of the growth he supposedly got was off screen with Pixel, so I think the next logical step is for him to get a proper on-screen arc where his character really gets to grow and develop, because it's been forever since he's gotten one of those. Granted, good character writing doesn't always involve an arc, but it would be fun for him to really overcome something substantial in the near future, because I just can't call the character not being written awfully anymore progress in any sort of good faith. The final thing I think I really need to see is Pixel and her relationship with Zane get some good development. She's been a static and largely boring character since her introduction, and I find parts of her relationship with Zane to be downright rancid at times, so I'd really appreciate it if the Ninjago team did some work there. All that aside though, I am pretty happy with how Zane was handled, and the Ninjago team should be proud of what they've accomplished for now. The only reason I don't want to immediately switch up and say he's been saved is because we've only seen him written like this for one stretch of episodes, and he was in maybe 6 of them. If they can continue on this path and write Zane properly while acting upon the criticism with him over coming installments, I will consider them to have saved him, but until then I will watch how they handle him with great interest. That's all from me though, so thank you all for watching this far into the video, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Goodbye for now. With all that being said, I am incredibly disappointed that he didn't take off his shirt this season. Please, Zane, I need this!
When you feel tired, look at yourself. Inside your heart, you will find a special place.